Today I'm actually doing something that I never ever thought I would be doing. I'm bringing wood chips into the garden, kind of. Stay tuned to find out how I'm doing that and why the heck I'm even doing it coming up. Thanks for watching the video today. I'm Diego. I'm a podcaster. I'm a YouTuber. I'm a home gardener. I'm doing this for fun. I'm not a farmer. I hope you can follow along with my journey and learn some things along the way. Last week in the video, I talked about how I was setting up my lower section on wider beds, and this week I'm going to be focusing on the upper section, which has narrow beds. And in that upper section, I recently made the decision to do something that I said in the introduction I never thought I would do. I added wood chips into the garden beds. Kind of. I didn't put wood chips on the surface of the bed. I've actually integrated wood chips into my pathways, and I think there are some benefits to that, and I'm experimenting with it, and there are some specific reasons why I didn't want to add them into the beds themselves. So that's the TLDR version of this video. A lot of people extol the benefits of wood chips when it comes to gardening, and I think of those benefits as benefits. Like, they're not really quantifiable benefits. A lot of people, it's their opinion, it works in their situation. Like most things when it comes to growing, it's not a universal truth. It's not a silver bullet. And I think too many of those people into wood chips are very dogmatic about wood chips, like it's wood chips or nothing else. Wood chips is the way to take you to the promised land. Well, I think there's a lot of cons about wood chips, but let's start with the potential benefits of wood chips. The benefits of wood chips range from stuff that we can definitely quantify to stuff that is a little bit more assuming we're imposing benefit rather than, yeah, there's for sure benefit there. So the quantifiable benefits might be, they look nice. I think in general, wood chips and pathways look really nice and they tend to look better than dirt. They tend to smother out weeds. That's a benefit. They do create less of a mess because if it rains on dirt, you're going to get mud. If it rains on wood chips, the wood chips buffer the soil from the rain. You're not dealing with mud. Wood chips are also going to increase the water holding capacity of soil because the wood chips themselves can hold water, but they're also providing a barrier between the air and the soil, so you're getting less evaporation of water coming out of the soil. So as a mulch, they are beneficial. Wood chips also have the benefit of building soil in place. Eventually, those wood chips will break down, and you are going to get nice soil where the wood chips were. You're essentially doing long-term composting or short-term composting if you're in a really wet environment that is suitable for the breakdown of wood chips. So you're composting in place, you're building soil in place. Definitely a benefit of wood chips. Where I think it gets a little dicey and where I'm not so sure that anybody can really quantify the benefits are when they say, well, you're introducing fungi to the garden. You're bringing mycelium into the garden. You're adding mycelium into the soil food web. Okay, that sounds really beneficial. I've talked with Dr. Elaine Ingham on this. I've talked to Paul Stamets. I've interviewed them both. Like, I get the benefits of mycelium. But is it really beneficial to have mycelium and a fungal component in the top of your soil, if you're just using them as a mulch, or in your pathways if you're putting wood chips in your pathways for vegetables growing in your beds? Like, is that fungal activity making those plants grow better? I don't know, and I'm not convinced that anybody knows or has results to show that it is truly better. Now, sure, you have a lot of people out there saying, like, look at my results. They're amazing with these wood chips. Like, I wouldn't do it any other way. But that's one case. And in certain areas like where the back to Eden method became famous, wood chips break down very fast there. In Southern California, where it's really dry, where our rain is bunched in one chunk of the year, and for 6+ months of the year we don't get any rain, wood chips just don't break down fast. So you're losing a lot of the benefits of wood chips when it comes time to increase fungal activity, to build soil in place. So that's why I'm not so sure that the benefits always outweigh the cons. But one thing I am a big believer in is do what makes you feel good. Do what you enjoy. Do what makes you comfortable. Do what you enjoy looking at. If you're not a production farmer, a market farmer, who cares? This is all a hobby. Have fun with it. If you believe that wood chips make your garden better, do it. If you believe that they look better, put them out there. If it keeps you gardening and you have fun doing it, that's the whole damn point. It's a hobby. Have fun with it. But be careful when you try and turn scientific and say, well, this is why it is better, because unless you can prove it or at least show a line of reason to why it might be better, it might not actually be better. So I'm kind of have a foot in both camps. I want to know why it actually is better, but I also kind of just believe deep down that it is helping. So what are the cons around wood chips? Why was I reluctant to use wood chips? For a few reasons, I really held back on wood chips, and there's a big reason why I didn't put wood chips in my actual garden beds. A lot of my production plan for cover cropping, for planting, involves direct seeding, running a seeder through the soil of my garden beds. If you have wood chips on the surface of your garden bed, you're not running a seeder through it easily. So everything you are probably direct transplanting. Now there are probably a certain type of wood chips, if they're ground fine enough, that you could run a seeder through. But I have trouble finding that type of mulch or wood chips out here in Southern California. It tends to be bigger and chunkier, and that is just going to wreak havoc or make a mess of a seeder when you try and do that. So from a pure, this is what I need to get done standpoint, wood chips are a barrier to that. So that's why I didn't want to put them on top of the bed. Another potential con to putting them on the bed is you better be committed to that for a long term, because there's really no going back from that. It's not easy to remove them off the bed. I mean, it is easy in the sense of like you just rake them off, but that's a lot of work to take them off. It's not something as simple as flipping a switch and they're gone. So if you ever want to undo that, you're going to be spending some time really undoing it. And another big reason why I haven't put them on top of the bed is I don't think I'm getting a benefit of building soil in place with the wood chips that I have access to in my particular climate, in my biome. Given as dry as it is, given the type of wood chips that I have access to, they just don't break down quickly. So I'm losing the soil building component. I think a better strategy for me to build soil is through cover crops and compost than it is with wood chips. The wood chips are just harder to come by, slower to break down. They're bigger, they're chunkier. I've had wood chips sitting on my property for years and years that just sit there on surface. They're not going anywhere because it's so dry. Fungal activity is low. So that's why I have not put wood chips on top of my beds. So I didn't put wood chips directly on top of the planting surface, but where did I put the wood chips? What I decided to do was put wood chips in all of my pathways in a very big way. For the longest time, we've had wood chips around a play area where my kids have played. We've since decided to get rid of wood chips in that area and put down crushed rock instead. It's just more durable, it's more longer lasting. I like the look of it better. So I had all these wood chips sitting around their swing set and stuff that I had to do something with. So I thought, okay, now is my chance. Wood chips on site, wood chips that have kind of been broken down. They're a little bit smaller in size from sitting there for years, from having people walk on them. What could I do with these? I decided to put them in the pathways between my beds. And I didn't just sprinkle them on top of the pathways that were there. I decided to excavate out the pathways and then fill those excavated trenches with wood chips. So let's take a look at how I did that. Right here you get a nice shot of one of the trenches that I was working on along with one of the existing pathways that was there before this all started. All I did is I went through with a square shovel and dug out each of these pathways, which are about 12 inches wide. Everything that came out of the pathways went on top of the garden bed next to it. The excavation accomplished a few things. One, it gave me a trench to put wood chips into. Two, it allowed me to build up my beds, which is something I was trying to do. I was trying to raise these beds up a little and make them deeper. It also gave me a chance to integrate a lot of biochar into these beds, because before I did any of the trenching, I laid down a layer of biochar on each of the beds and then covered that with the spoil or the dirt that I removed from the trench. So that biochar became buried under a brand new layer of soil. Digging these trenches was a pretty interesting experience because it gave you a rare look at what's actually happening in your soil. As I was digging these, I learned quite a few things. One, the soil was a lot wetter than I ever thought it was. You can look at the surface of the soil, you can kind of stick your fingers down in it and gauge how wet it is, but unless you dig a deep hole, you don't really have an idea of what's going on in the substructure of the soil. And in digging this trench, I realized, wow, this is really wet down here. This soil is holding a lot of moisture. It looks really good. The other thing I found inside these trenches were tons and tons of worms, which was actually ironic to me because when I transplanted things like tomatoes and stuff, I never saw a lot of worms. And I'm just like, where are all the worms? Well, apparently they were just deeper than I was looking, because as I was flipping out this soil, it was just worm after worm after worm. So that was really great to see. The whole idea here was to dig out a trench about shovel depth, about shovel width, the whole length of the row. Then I came back in that trench and I filled it in with wood chips. The strategy here was to try and take the coarser, chunkier wood chips, the bigger stuff, and put that into the bottom of the trench because it would be off the pathway. I then came back with more wood chips, but of a finer texture, and top dressed all the pathways with that, giving it just a better look and a better texture to walk on. And I think it'll make it nicer in terms of not having big chunks kicked everywhere. The little chunks tend to mat together nicely. Here you can see me layering down biochar on one of the beds. Before I did the excavation, I had a huge amount of biochar on site, so I tried to put it down really, really thick. I mean, this is almost like painting each row surface with biochar before it. All this biochar will now get buried with the spoil from the trench. So now I'll have this nice layer of biochar in the subsurface of the soil there for the next few millennia. Once all the trenches were filled, the next step was just to rake out the beds. I just took all the fill dirt that I put into the beds, raked it smooth, tried to level the beds as best as I could. That was another advantage of using all this spoil from the trenches in the beds. So I tried to rake them as flat as I could over the surface. Once the beds were raked level, I planted cover crops into the bed. I did both ryegrass and mustard at different densities, really trying to get a feel for what spacing is going to provide the most biomass. I'll get into more of that in a future video, but the final step in all this was to make sure that I wasn't leaving bare soil there. I was actually planting into them, and then I just watered it in and waited for the rains to come. The rains did come, and the cover crops grew, and now everything's looking pretty slick. One thing I'm really curious about is what's going to happen with these pathways in terms of fungal activity. If you look right here, you can see a chunk of wood chips that came out of the play area. Look at all the mycelium covering these wood chips. Now, it looks really cool. I kind of get like the happy guy, woo, mycelium, when I see this. I know it's building soil, but how beneficial is this to annual vegetables? And how beneficial is this to annual vegetables when the vegetables are in the bed and the mycelium is in the pathway over here? So you have plants here, you have the mycelium here. I know mycelium can go for miles and miles, but are these roots right here benefiting and going into this pathway to really tap into that, quote, potential resource? I don't know. So one thing I may do during the growing season is try and dig into these pathways a little bit, look down in there. Am I seeing roots from the plants go into the pathways and seeking out something that they like they're only going to do that if it's beneficial for them. Will I see that? Will it be visible? I don't know. Or will it just be unseen potential benefits that are happening there, this unseen synergy? We'll see. I'm also curious about how long these wood chips are going to take to break down in my climate. The stuff at the surface I expect to last a while because that's always going to be dry. It's just sitting there. The wind's coming across it. The sun's baking on it. It's not staying wet. But some of these wood chips are a foot deep in the ground now. Those things are going to be breaking down quickly. So one potential benefit to doing this is down the line, I could take everything out of these pathways, shovel it out, throw it on top of the bed, and then refill the pathways with new mulch. So I'm composting in between the rows over a long period of time. And then I'm then building up the beds using that compost that's just happened right next to the bed. I think that's going to be more in the scale of years than months or a couple seasons. I think it's going to take a long time in my climate, but we'll see. And then I'm also curious, am I going to get fruiting bodies starting to pop up in any of the pathways? I would just get excited to see that. Am I going to see mushrooms coming up? We'll see. Overall, was this project worth it? I don't know. To be determined. We'll see. It was fun. I mean, I like doing hard work. I actually really like digging, so it was great exercise. That's a net benefit. I had fun doing it. That's a net benefit. I got to make a video about it, and hopefully you like the video. That's a net benefit. And I did something with wood chips I had to move anyway, so that's a benefit, and maybe the plants also benefit. That's good. I don't in any way conceive this of being a waste of time. Like I said in the beginning, this is a hobby. It should be fun. If it's not fun, then there's a problem. Why are you doing it? Don't take it so serious, and especially you commenters down there. Like, I'm just trying stuff. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a farmer. So this is just how I'm doing it. Don't cut me some slack here. Try things for yourself and then make videos about them. If you're thinking about adding wood chips to your garden, here would be my advice. Start with really thinking about what are you trying to accomplish and why are you trying to accomplish it? And then put a plan in place that really mimics that. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish or why you're trying to do it, well then what are you actually doing anyway? Why do anything? So have a plan and then really try and understand your own unique context, your climate, how you're growing, what you're growing. Just because it worked for somebody else, just because I'm doing it, doesn't mean it's going to be right for you. Or just because somebody else is doing it, doesn't mean it's going to be right for you. You have to find what works in your situation. Use what I'm saying and what others are suggesting as guides and ideas to refine down something that is the best fit for your individual context. Now that wood chips are in the pathway, it is full steam ahead. I finally feel like the lower section of my garden is set. The upper section is now set. Cover crops have been planted in the lower and upper section. Rain has came, things are growing, we are moving forward, and we're finally on our way. After years of kind of putting a system in place, putting infrastructure in place, I feel like 2020 is the year where finally everything's in place, it's all set up. Now it is time to grow and experiment with different growing techniques. So there will be a lot more of that ahead. I'll continue to post results about the cover crops, why I'm doing what I'm doing with cover crops, how these wood chips worked out. More videos every Friday in 2020. Stay tuned for another one next week. Thanks for watching this one, and until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work. There's not enough kindness out there. They're too quick to judge, they're too quick to hate, they're too quick to try and prove that they're right. Nobody's just thankful for the information that they do have. So I wish people could be a little more kind.